So today we are looking at a topic that is criminally overlooked in my opinion, and the fact that it is baffles me every time because this is such a crucial concept for having your mixes translate well on a wide range of sound systems. And what I'm talking about specifically here is the mid-range. There's a saying that goes, magic is in the mid-range, and that saying exists for a reason. Did you ever wonder, for example, why you see the same set of monitor speakers in a variety of world-renowned studios? You know, these speakers with the white cones, they're called Yamaha NS10s, and the reason why so many mixing and mastering engineers swear by them is the mid-range. On these monitors, tell you the absolute truth about your track. If it sounds good on these speakers, it sounds good almost anywhere else. And the reason I'm gonna focus on the mid-range today is because of something you might already have noticed yourself, especially if you work on something for a longer period of time. So let's say you're 45 minutes, an hour into your project, and you already are in the process of mixing your track, because techno is different from other genres, right? Like in rock and pop music, for example, usually you get stems or individual tracks delivered to you and then the mixing engineer mixes them. But in techno, and that is a very specific thing for this genre, we are mixing as we go for the most part. And because of that, sometimes it's not that easy to differentiate if your frequency spectrum looks the way it should. Because after 40 to 50 minutes of producing and simultaneously mixing, it's easy to get lost in what some people call the smiley curve. So you have a huge overpronounced low end. And chances are very overpronounced highs as well. And there's a big dip in the middle. It looks a little bit like a bathtub. But chances are you still think it sounds good in that moment until you come back to the track a day later or so. Or you listen to it on a car system or on AirPods or whatever else. So to visualize this concept, I have a track here. And to really hammer this point home, I only have a drum track here, consists of kick, bass, and hi-hats, and then two different synth tracks. And we're gonna look at each of those individually. Usually you would fill out the spectrum with stuff like maybe noises or atmospheres in the background, more textures, but let's keep it simple for today. I will also use a dynamic EQ and one of my rather indispensable tools in my arsenal, which is tonal balance control. And tonal balance control is fed by a number of tracks that I know work well in a club. So I put a bunch of tracks as references in tonal balance control, and the plugin analyzes them and then spits out a curve so we can compare how our own track is holding up. So we're gonna start out with some simple bleepy stuff. This is my sequence. And if we take a look at the frequency spectrum, we can see we have these spikes here. And if I now engage my drums, it's a little bit better, but not really there, because we only have these two spikes here and the rest of the spectrum is still missing. So we need to put some more work into that. First thing I'm gonna do is introduce some dynamic EQ. And for this, I'm going to use an instance of Pro Q3. So you can see at 468 and 740 Hertz, this is where I engaged the dynamic EQ just to tame the spikes a little bit. And also, let's engage some delay. And in context. Again, a little bit better, but not really there. So the next thing I did was I introduced another operator. And what this does, if we listen to it solo, you can hear there's some more mid frequencies coming in, which we can also see on the spectrum. Helps to fill out the whole thing even more. Then I introduced some saturation. And this really does something to the high mids. Wasn't really enough for me, so I decided to introduce operator C as well. And you can see the frequencies on the operators are quite crude, because that's how I like my sound. But even if you do melodic stuff, you can apply the same concept. So every move you make that fills the spectrum more is really helpful. And then last but not least, I duplicated my track and added some notes 2 octaves higher. And now we can see that the mid to high mid spectrum is really nicely filled out. And let's listen to this in context. And we can also see in tonal balance control, this is where we want to land roughly. I could still work on the bass and take out some, but you get the picture. The next sequence is made with Granulator 2, and I sequenced this with the Max for Life Snake sequencer. Sounds like this. And this time we already have much more information in the mid-range, so it's a little bit easier to process this and make it fit into our mix. First thing I did was put some OTT on there. These are my settings. You can also, of course, use the Ableton built-in OTT. Same thing. And then I narrowed down our frequency spectrum, which is something I do all the time, especially for the synth part of my tracks, because I don't really want it to shine in the areas where the kick, bass, and the hi-hats are located. So everything that is cymbals, rides, hi-hats, and shakers should live in this area right here. And I don't want it to be masked by my synth. So let's engage that. And you might think that sounds a little bit muffled, but let's hear it in context when we have everything running. And you can always play with the cutoff of the high frequencies. Next, I just bumped a bit of the high mid frequencies. And engaged an amp, but the amp is really, really low in the mix. We are roughly at 9% here. A little bit of sidechain compression to our kick. Let's have a listen. And we can see, again, our spectrum is roughly where it should be. If I now disengage all my plugins, you can see the dip in the spectrum analyzer here, and you can see it also in tonal balance control. Let's re-engage it. So again, the mid-range is an absolute crucial part of your tracks, and it's easy to get lost in designing kicks, rumbles, and hi-hats. And especially when you're mixing loud, because let's be honest, it's fun. After a while, our brain activates an inbuilt compression, so to speak. So if we get bombarded with loud sound, all our brain does is tells our ears to shut down, and we can't really differentiate between low mids, mids, and highs. Everything just becomes one big mess. So we want to avoid that by having tools at our disposal like a frequency analyzer and a dynamic EQ, so we can really hone in our mid frequencies and make sure that everything translates well to other systems. So that's it for today. Hope you found this useful, and as always, make sure to check our website, sine.de, and I'm going to see you soon. Take care.